Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys stopping by, taking a look at my video here. Yes, so what I did was I got me another Roderick Nava game, and it is between him and Randolph Schain. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. He's Cambodian, so you see the Cambodian flag. Now, unfortunately, I could not find a picture for him. I honestly don't know what this man looks like. But I tried on all the different chess engines and stuff, or not chess engines, search engines, but I could not find him. But I took this game from the same 2018 Asian Continental chess tournament. So for all you guys that are from the Philippines, magandang umaga, aking mga kaibigan, kamusta na? You know, mabuhay to you guys, got lagi. Appreciate it very much for stopping by. Anybody who speaks Cebuano, maayong buntag. For anybody who speaks Ilocano, nine bag not begat. Good morning to you guys. Now there is some other ones for Aklanon, Mayad na Agahan. It's gonna take me a minute to get that. I also have Pangasinan, Masantos ya Kabusan. I think somebody mentioned on my video yesterday that they wanted me to say good morning in that language as well. I also have one more because Cambodian, they speak a language called Khmer, I believe, around Suswe. Around Suswe to you guys, and this is the way that they do it. Good morning to you guys. Hello. Thank you guys for coming by. But if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and take a look, see what we have for this game. All right, so we got D4, C5, and we have knight to F3. It's not the most common way to play. Usually when you play the Benoni, you are going to go D5, so you can kind of close the structure up some. You'll see, like, you know, something like this: G6, knight to C3, knight to F6, bishop coming here, maybe some E6s situations going on, but we do see knight to F3. We got G6, so this is actually called the modern defense, the Pterodactyl defense. You know, it's just aiming to try to, you know, switch, exchange off one of white's center pawns for a wing pawn, which is pretty much the whole idea behind the Sicilian defense as well. So we see G3. Bishop to G7, we have bishop to G2, pawn takes D4, knight takes D4. So as you can see, white is trying to deal with this kind of in a hyper modern way. So we got knight to C6, knight takes C6, pawn takes C6. We got castles by white, rook to B8. So we're just trying to throw a little double attack on this B2 pawn here. So, you know, C3 perfectly defends that. We got knight to F6. We have E4 because, you know, you're trying to get, you know, black has a good little center that they can try to establish, so you're trying to disrupt that as much as possible. So we see castles by black, queen comes to C2, which is actually the novelty of the game, and it was played by Roderick Nava, so it's the novelty. Oh man, anyway, so I got a chance to say novelty. So my little coined phrase, I'm gonna trademark that. No, I'm playing. So we got D5, and we see rook to D1. Also possible was actually playing bishop to F4. Just trying to tickle this rook, ask it what it really wants to do on B8, seeing if it's going to move back this way, or, you know, possibly just try to move down the file a little bit. So we do see rook to D1. Like I always say, guys, you know, whenever you do have a queen or a king on a certain file, it's always good to put rooks opposite them, because usually you have some tactics that can come up. So, you know, it's never a bad thing. So the bishop comes to D4, and this poses a little bit of a problem for white, because do you move the rook back maybe to E1, or do you play F3? I think that probably moving the rook is probably best, but you know, we do see F3 in the game, and as you guys can see, the whole like thing that black is trying to do is it's trying to blunt this bishop as much as possible. So a lot of times you'll see bishop G5s and bishop, you know, B4s and stuff like that, trying to make the pawn move. Because this is a really nice spot for a knight. So you might have saw something like knight B to D2 to knight to F3, or knight to D2, knight to F3. So we see bishop back to E6. We got bishop to E3, queen comes to C7, and we have knight to D2. Now you want to be very careful in this position, from what I just said a minute ago, for possibly playing bishop to F4, thinking, man, you know what, I'm going to win me some material, bro, because black messed up. You know, Roderick Nava is not that good at chess. You know, let's go ahead and just get some material, right? But you would be sad after queen to B6 with check. Now, unfortunately, you have under-defended your pawn here. And, you know, Roderick Nava wasn't, you know, he was smarter than you thought. And then king went down to H1, and then you saw queen taking on B2. now you're losing a pawn. So don't do that. Be very careful, you know, when you're making moves, especially when you have a diagonal open and you have a queen on the board. It can get kind of nasty. So we saw knight to d2, and then we saw queen to b7. We saw b3, rook f to d8. We saw rook a to c1. We got a5. Bishop comes to d4. Also possible. Just trying to open up this bishop, you know, like before, you know, we blocked the bishop in. Instead of bishop to d4, is actually playing e5. After knight came to d7, you'd see f4, bishop to f5. So that would be kind of annoying, but you got queen to b2, a4, and then b4. And, you know, you've liberated your bishop somewhat. So you kind of actually now have some little targets to attack. Maybe you could try to push a3 and then get c4 in. But like I said, we do see after these moves, bishop comes to d4. We got queen to c7, rook to e1. We got c5. Bishop comes down to e3. So as you guys can see, you know, black is starting to, you know, kind of press, you know, white down a little bit. They're starting to grab some more space. They're getting a little bit more mobile. You know, it's going to be looking really good for these bishops. So rook b comes to c8. Just putting added pressure onto this pawn, especially when you have something like d4 coming. The king comes to h1. And I actually disagree with this move because I feel like it's just like wasting a little bit of time, a little bit of a tempo. And it's just really, really too passive. The king was not really in danger on g1 because this bishop is attacking this way and it's not attacking this way. So I think you were pretty safe on g1, but king to h1 did come. The pawn takes e4, knight takes e4. We got knight taking e4 and then pawn taking e4. So as you can see, what's changed from before is white does have a little bit of a disadvantage here with this pawn. They have a lot of, you know, artillery coming at this c3 pawn. Not a great ability to push it. So we see c4, b4, rook coming to d3. So this is a real bone in the throat of white. You do not want a rook to just kind of just ensconce itself right there in your kitchen. So we see bishop to f4, attacking the queen. We got queen to b6, forcing the trade on a5. Pawn takes a5, queen takes a5. And as you can see, black has gotten rid of one of their weaknesses as far as this a pawn is concerned. And now white pretty much is the one with all the weaknesses. Their pawn structure is horribly damaged. And black is going to very soon start to press, you know, even further on white. So we have e5. We have to block this bishop because this bishop and this rook and this queen were just too powerful on this square. So we don't want to see that. So the bishop came to d5. Bishop takes on d5. Queen takes on d5 with check. We got queen to g2. Queen back to a5. You know, hoping that at some point you can get this rook over and attack this pawn properly. And also you're adding a little bit of extra pressure onto the c3 pawn again. So we see queen to b2. We have e6 because black is saying you're never, ever, ever going to do anything with this bishop. Like I want this, like this bishop is literally just like a tall pawn. So it's almost like you have a pawn chain here and you just have a funny looking pawn at the end of the day. So we see rook to c2. The queen comes to d5. We got rook to g2, h6. We got h4. We have g5. Pawn takes g5. Pawn takes g5. Bishop takes g5. And now we've successfully opened this file. And we've also gotten this bishop attacking this pawn. So the bishop takes on e5. We have queen to f2. Bishop takes on c3. So now you are down a pawn with the same color bishops. But the major problem is the fact that this king is very, very unsafe. And this rook is pinned. So you just have like way too many things going on as white. So the rook comes to f1, you know, hoping for the dream case slam dunk scenario where you take on f7 with check, force the king over, and then you're making all kinds of mate threats. So we see f5 because Nava's not, Roderick's not having none of that. So the king comes to h2. We see king to f7. And like I said before, you know, this rook is going to be swinging over here once the king moves. And this king is very, very uncomfortable right now. So we got queen to f4. We got bishop to e5. Queen comes to g4. We have successfully unpinned, but we still have a lot of pressure on this g3 pawn. So the rook comes to h8 with check. We see bishop down to h4. You know, of course, the queen is taking advantage of the fact this pawn is pinned so it doesn't get taken. The rook comes to d4. asking the queen, you know, what does it want to do? And so we see a rook sacrifice, which we're hoping to maybe possibly get some type of perpetual check going on, but there aren't any. So the rook takes on f5 with check. We got pawn taking f5, queen taking f5, king backs up to g8. We see queen to g6 with check, and we see bishop covering on g7. And unfortunately, the situation is that this bishop is pinned here to this king. So you don't have the ability to try to take advantage of maybe this bishop's, you know, being pinned to the king. So we see rook to f2. And we have reached a point in the game where if you want to go ahead and stop the video and guess and see what is a very, very strong move for black, go ahead and do so real quick. All right, cool. So you guys hear me say all the time, all the videos that I make, you guys hear me talk about trading down when you are up material. It's not an always type of a situation where always you're going to be good, but like a majority of the time, if you are up material, it's going to just be that much easier for you to trade material down and get into just a favorable type of an endgame. And it can even be a situation where if you're up a pawn, you know, you can trade down and just have a favorable endgame if it's winnable, you know. So be careful when you're doing that with the pawn. But anyway, if you guys chose rook h takes h4 with check, you would be absolutely right, because you are threatening a lot here. If you want to try to run away, you can't do it successfully because you have checkmate here. You can also drop the queen down and have checkmate, just checkmates all day. So you are really kind of forced to take. You know, we see after the pawn takes on h4, we see queen to d6 with check. This queen is undefended here. So you are forcing the trade of queens. So this is all she wrote, and it is in this position that Schain does resign the game. So congratulations, Roderick Nava, you got your win. And it was just clean, you know. Like I said, I mean, just from a fundamental standpoint, you know, Roderick Nava is up material. So this is going to be the most legitimate thing to do, is to try to trade pieces down as much as possible. So, you know, the queen would be taken, and then the rook would be taken. And then as you guys can see, this is just way too much material, because all you have to do is get behind this pawn as black. You're going to be forcing the rook to come down to c1 to defend. But unfortunately, that is a dark square, and this bishop is going to have the ability to come and knock that rook away. So it's just completely unwinnable. So that is that. But I appreciate you guys coming by. Maraming salamat po aking makaibigan and higala. If you have any more things for me, let me know in the comments. And I will see you guys next time. All right.